Okay. Should have done that first, oh well. Joab, so this is not going on for 3 years. So for 3 years, Absalom is with his family in Geshur, his mother's family in Geshur. And that's, I guess, an independent city-state. David can't just go there and ask for him back. You know, Absalom is a member of that royal family, and I guess David, isn't going to go provoke a fight with what is obviously an ally in a city-state he is allied with. So he really can't do anything. Okay, remember, Absalom's mother is the princess of Geshur. So he's a member of the royal family there through his mother's side, and it's apparently an independent city-state that David has an alliance with. So there's really nothing David can do short of declaring war on Geshur and going to fight to get Absalom back. So he's stuck. He really can't do anything. Absalom obviously had this escape route in mind before he killed. He had 2 years to plan his revenge against Amnon. So he clearly had this escape route in mind, planned, and took it. And now it's been 3 years since then. So it's been 5 years since this all started with the rape of Tamar. And that itself, of course, would have happened sometime after the event with David and Bathsheba. Probably at least a year after, because it would seem to have been after the baby was born and died. So it's like we're getting to be a number of years past that, but we're still dealing with the fallout from it. Because everything we read in this section of 2 Samuel is fallout from David's sin with Bathsheba and the murder of Uriah. Like everything we read from here until 2 Samuel 20 is a consequence of that. And this is getting to be a number of years now. And it'll continue on, too, for some time to come. Joab, son of Zeruiah, he's the general of the army, remember, knew that the king's heart longed for Absalom. So again, just think of it in terms of the king is thinking about. Remember, heart in Scripture is where you think. Okay, in our day and time, we now know the brain is where we think, and we associate the heart with emotions. I love you. I put a heart in there, a little heart shape. We think of heart as being where the emotions are centered, and the mind being where the thoughts are centered. But that's not how it was in the ancient days. In the ancient days, they thought of the heart as where the thoughts were centered, and they thought of the gut as where the emotions were centered. Like when you're afraid or excited, you feel a tingle in your gut. So to them, in that day and time, your bowels, or your belly, or your gut, your intestines, were where you felt your emotions. And your heart was where you had your thoughts. They didn't know what the brain was for. So whenever we read heart in Scripture, like our heart longs for someone, or it's on our heart, really that means mind. We should think of that in our understanding as mind. So the king's mind is obsessed with Absalom. He's thinking about Absalom day after day. He's not like emotionally longing to go see Absalom. But his mind, like his thoughts are obsessed with Absalom. He's thinking about Absalom day after day. He can't concentrate on anything else. And Joab knows this. Joab can see through this. So Joab sent someone to Tekoa and had a wise woman brought from there. Tekoa will be where one of our prophets is going to come from down the line. We haven't really gotten into the prophets yet. I'm looking forward to that. In fact, it's actually kind of the reason why I'm doing this whole video series, is so I can get to the prophets and talk about the prophets, because I think that's a major part of Scripture that we have ignored and really need to pay a lot of attention to today, and are not paying attention to. But Amos is going to come from Tekoa. So we're going to see that name again. Joab sent someone to Tekoa and had a wise woman brought from there. He said to her, not necessarily a prophet or a prophetess, just a wise woman. He said to her, pretend you are in mourning. Dress in mourning clothes, and don't use any cosmetic lotions. Act like a woman who has spent many days grieving for the dead. Then go to the king and speak these words to him. And Joab put the words in her mouth. When the woman from Tekoa went to the king, or spoke to the king, she fell with her face to the ground to pay him honor. And she said, Help me, O king. This is the words that Joab put in her mouth. We haven't read what those words were, but we're going to find out as she speaks them. Then the king asked her, what is troubling you? Now, part of the king's job was to settle disputes amongst the people. We'll see Solomon do this. In that famous ruling of the two women fighting over the one baby, Solomon is going to be settling a dispute for the people. The judges used to do this. Remember the judges? We read about Deborah sitting under the palm tree and judging the disputes that the Israelites brought to her. Like the judges used to do this. Moses did this way back when they were first coming out of Egypt and they first settled around Mount Sinai. And they were resting there with, even before, they were resting with Moses' father-in-law before, right after they came out of Egypt. And he would settle their disputes every day. They would come to him and he'd settle their disputes. And Moses' father-in-law was saying, you're going to wear yourself out doing that. You can't be the only one doing this. You've got to appoint people, capable people who can make decisions as well so that you're not having to do everything every day for everybody. So it was part of their job. We don't really think of that today. Like our president today does not go around and settle disputes between people today. We have court systems that are supposed to do that. But and this is, I'm not sure how much David did this. But this would have been part of his job as king, to settle disputes. And Absalom is going to actually take advantage of this. In a chapter, part of Absalom's coup attempt is going to be him exploiting the people's frustration that David has kind of cut himself off from them. David apparently had gotten more withdrawn as time goes on and was not settling the disputes of the people. And Absalom, as we'll see in a chapter, will use this as a wedge to get himself in there and put himself between David and the people, because he's going to sit at the city gate and say, boy, I sure wish I was king. If I was king, I'd be able to settle your dispute and rule in your favor, but I'm not king, so I can't do that. And the king that we've got, he's just sitting in his palace twiddling his thumbs. I don't know what he's doing. So it was supposed to be part of the king's duties, part of the king's jobs, to hear these disputes, to hear these cases and settle these disputes. I have to be very careful because I don't want this chair to fall apart. This armrest of this chair is quite literally just hanging there and will fall apart eventually. So anytime I change position, I have to be very careful not to tear this chair apart. So anyway, she's going in. So the king asked her, what is troubling you? She said, I am indeed a widow. My husband is dead. I, your servant, had 2 sons. They got into a fight with each other in the field, and no one was there to separate them. One struck the other and killed him. Now the whole clan has risen up against your servant. They say, hand over the one who struck his brother down, so that we may put him to death for the life of his brother whom he killed. We will get rid of the heir as well. Now this is justifiable. Like they're supposed to do this. Like if this was not manslaughter, if this was an act of murder, if the brother struck the other one down intentionally, this is a crime guilty of death. I'm assuming the idea is that, I don't know, is Tekoa one of the sanctuary cities? I don't think so. I don't think Tekoa is one of the sanctuary cities. Now I'm assuming that the idea is that the brother in the story. Now this is not real. This did not actually happen. This woman is telling a story here, as Joab instructed her to. But I am assuming the idea behind this is that the brother fled to a sanctuary city. I don't think a city of refuge. I don't believe Shechem, Ramoth. That's all the ones east of. I don't know where the list is, but I don't believe Tekoa was one of them. At any rate, I think the idea behind this, the unspoken, unfilled-in idea that the lady is assuming David is thinking as she tells him the story, is that the brother fled to a sanctuary city or a refuge city. and is trying to make the case that he shouldn't be put to death, because he should be. If this story were accurate, the family avenger should be coming after him to kill him, and the blood avenger is blood is supposed to kill, is supposed to collect on that blood guilt. So that's what the clan is saying, according to this woman who's making up this story, as Joab told her to. The clan is saying, we need to make up for the blood this man has shed by shedding his blood. So we will put him to death for the life of the brother whom we killed. Then we will get rid of the heir as well. But the woman is saying, they will put out the only burning coal I have left, leaving my husband neither name nor descendant on the face of the earth. So if they do this, the story is, if they kill this brother, who is a murderer, like the woman is not saying that this was an accidental death. They got into a fight, and he struck and killed his brother. So we are talking about a person who is guilty of murder, not manslaughter. But she's saying that if we kill this man, this only son I have left, then I won't have anything left. She'll be destitute. She'll be a widow and without any sons to take care of her. And her husband then would have no descendants left on the earth. And we've said over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, from the beginning of Scripture until now, that the worst thing that could happen to you at this point in time, they didn't have the concept of life after death that we would eventually develop. And God had not told them, as of now, in the days of David, around 1000 BC, God has not told them that he is going to resurrect them someday and they'll live life everlasting with God in heaven or whatever someday. Like, they don't know that. That has not been revealed to mankind yet at this point. In their minds or hearts, again, they thought with their hearts, their way of living forever was to have their names continue on forever, and the way to do that was to have lots of sons. And if you didn't have sons, at least you had a daughter who would have a son in your name. She would she would have a son with your brother or some other male member of your family after you died, and she would have a son in your name. So that's how they lived forever. That's how they continued being alive forever. As long as your name was spoken, as long as your name was on the lips of people, as long as you had sons and descendants to carry on your name and carry out your rituals. In some cases, we saw a little bit of this in the earth, and maybe it's fading by this point, I don't know. You would even have, the firstborn son would even act as a priest for the family and would carry on these rituals to keep the dead people, the descendants, the ancestors who had died alive, like in some, in Sheol or wherever. So it's like this idea of not having descendants on the earth to carry on your name and to remember your name was that was their version of hell. Okay, we think of hell as being this place where you go in a lake of fire after you die or whatever to live. But that was not what they thought of in terms of hell. Their thought of hell, their idea of eternal oblivion or extinction was to have no sons, was to die without having anyone to carry on your name on the earth. And to them, that was the most horrifying thing you could imagine. So to this woman, she is saying, and again, this is a story that she's making up because of Joab's message. But the angle to the story is that if we turn over this brother to be killed, which they should do, it's like this is a legal killing that would be performed if they did this. She would be destitute because then she would have no husband and no sons to carry on to take care of her and her widowhood. So she would be in a terrible place. Like, she would be in an awful, miserable place. And her husband, who is dead, would have no one left to carry on his name on the earth. So yes, you would be satisfying the law in terms of, avenging the blood of the brother who was killed, but you would be causing damage to this woman and to the memory of her husband in the process. And she is asking for intercession from the king for that not to happen. Of course, this is all a story. This is all a message that she was told to speak to the king by Joab to teach a lesson to the king, similar to what Nathan the prophet did when he came to David after his sin with Bathsheba. Now, in that case, Nathan was getting his message straight from God. In this case, this woman was getting her message from Joab. And Joab is definitely not God. But it's a similar thing. A similar thing is happening. Joab most likely got this idea to do this because of Nathan's previous encounter with David, having done this earlier. David might have been one of those guys, especially now that he was king, who just wasn't going to listen to an argument if you approach them directly with it. He was one. It seems like by this point in his life, at least, he had become one of those guys where if you're going to change his mind, you're going to have to get him to realize that he was wrong about something by fooling him, by laying these sorts of logic traps and leading him into a corner where he has to admit that he has to change his mind. He seems to have become one of those kinds of guys. And we all know those kinds of guys. But he is able to change his mind, though. It's unlike some dudes who would still be stubborn and would still refuse to change their minds or change their ways. Once he is confronted with his folly, he does change his ways. So he does have that going for him still. He is still the man after God's own heart. So anyway, the king said to the woman, "Go home. I will issue an order in your behalf." So he's saying, I will take care of it. I will protect your son from the blood avenger who's out to kill him. But the woman from Tekoa said to him, "My lord the king, let the blame rest on me and on my father's family, and let the king and his throne be without guilt. Because if he prevents the blood avenger from spilling the blood of the one who already spilled his brother's blood, then David himself is shielding a murderer." So the woman says, "I'll be guilty of that, not you, my king." The king replied, "If anyone says anything to you, bring him to me, and he will not bother you again." That's what you can do when you're a king. You can solve problems like that. You got a problem, just bring it to me and I'll solve it. That's what I can do when I'm king. That's why everyone wants to be king. Okay? It's like that. That's why everybody wants to be king. Everybody wants to be able to say, if someone's giving you a problem, you just bring it to me and I will solve that problem for you. Everyone wants to be able to do that. She said, "Then the king invoked the Lord his God to prevent the avenger of blood from adding to the destruction, so that my son will not be destroyed." Okay, so that's what she's trying to keep from happening, is the avenger of blood from destroying her son and destroying her husband's legacy and also making her destitute on the earth. And surely, she wants David to invoke the name of the Lord to say this. So he does. "As surely as the Lord lives," he said, "not one hair of your son's head will fall to the ground." Then the woman said, so that's what she wants. She's got him to invoke the name of the Lord in making this vow and making this oath of protection for herself and her son. That's what she's after, and that's what she got. Then the woman said, "Let your servant speak a word to my lord the king." "Speak," he replied. The woman said, by the way, just so you know, I mentioned this before, I'm going to say it again here. If you ever want to know why all these ancient biblical accounts where you have dialogue that goes back and forth between two characters, why they always have to say the king said, the woman said, the king said, the woman said, it's because, it's written that, it gets kind of tiring and exhausting reading that out loud, okay? But you have to remember that in their ancient language, in their ancient writing system, they did not have punctuation, they did not have periods, they did not have quotation marks, they did not have indentation and line breaks after every dialogue paragraph. That's all, you see this conversation here as it's written. You have all these paragraphs and line breaks and quotation marks and periods and commas and all these different formatting indications about how to indicate who's speaking. Okay, that's why we have those. As the centuries went on, as writing developed throughout the course of human history, we eventually developed these formatting styles to make it easier to determine when a character is speaking or when a character changes speaking, and when the speaker switches from one to another. They didn't have that here. Okay, this is 1000 BC or later. I'm not sure when this actually, the account, this is happening about 1000 BC. The account would have been written by one of the prophets or scribes, sometime shortly thereafter. Who knows? I mean, really, who knows? Nobody really knows exactly. This was 3,000 years ago. And so at that point in time, We didn't have all these formatting standards that we eventually developed and now take for granted to make it clear when the dialogue is changing, when the speaker is changing. We didn't have line breaks and column breaks and indentations and commas and periods of quotation marks. Okay, they didn't have that. They didn't have vowels when they wrote the original Hebrew text. They didn't have vowels. That's how early their language was at that point in time. So the way to indicate a speaker has changed is to say literally the speaker said something. When the king says something, you say the king says this. When the woman says something, you say the woman said that. That's why it does that all the time. There are a few places in Scripture where you don't have that, where you don't have a clear signifier that the speaker has changed. And it can become difficult then to determine who the speaker is. Is the speaker the same person it just was, or has there been a shift in the speaking? We're going to see that in some of the prophets. When the prophets come along and they start going on their monologues, and they shift back and forth, I mean, the Lord said this, the Lord said this, or whatever, sometimes the speakers are going to change very quickly. And we may not necessarily have like a clear, and you have to remember also they had different pronoun system too. Okay, we fight today over pronouns. You know, it's like honestly, the whole pronoun thing is something that humanity had solved. Okay, the whole idea of pronouns is an issue that, frankly, humanity had solved, and now we're messing up our use of pronouns again. We can't figure out how to use pronouns any longer. But back in those days, in some of these languages, they had a shift in pronouns that would tell you when the speaker shift too. Now, we don't see that at all in our English Bibles, because we use the words I for everything. But you would see a shift in the types of pronouns you use, which would also be a clue to them that the speakers had changed. Remember, these texts are also meant to be read aloud. I've said that over and over since the beginning too. So when a priest or a scribe who has practiced this, who has spoken this, who is used to speaking this out loud in front of the people, when he is sitting there speaking this out loud, he would know too, I'm sure. He would have a way of changing his cadence or style of speaking to make it clear to his hearers that the speaker has changed. And that's all stuff you just kind of, it helps to know this stuff because it helps to contextualize it to how it was originally written, how it was originally consumed, how it was meant to be consumed, and why it is the way it is, and how we need to be aware of that so that we understand that. It helps us be aware of why the text is the way it is, which helps us put in the proper mindset to receive it the way it was meant to be received. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and stop there and make a new video. We have gone through the part of the woman has played her part. Okay, she has spoken the message of Joab. She's played her role. She's done her acting. You know, this whole story about the two sons, I'm assuming it's totally made up. I think this is all just a parable or a piece of fiction. So that's done. She's gotten David to invoke the name of God, the name of the Lord, Jehovah, to promise protection for her and her son, and that's what she's needed, was to him to invoke the name of the Lord for that. And so now she's going to go on and tell him the message that she's really here to say. We'll get to that in a moment because it's getting to be long enough now for a new video.